Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me the pleasure of now presenting the moderator for our second panel discussion, Dr. Sumitra Nair, VP of Digital Talent Development from MDEC, for this session, which brings you the topic about future-proofing Malaysia's digital workforce. Skill up to scale up. Over to you now, Dr. Sumitra.
Thank you. Thank you to the MC, and a very good afternoon to all those who've tuned in. It's probably right after your lunch, so hopefully everybody had a good lunch and have your caffeine shots in hand, ready to help you to not just stay awake, but actively participate in the session today. I think it's, we have a very important topic to discuss today. It's about future-proofing our workforce. And when we talk about future-proofing, there's always a question of, when's the right time to do it? Do you, skill up first, your workforce, or do you actually pivot or scale your business and then, you upskill your staff? And this is a very relevant question, of course, in the given situation at the moment that we have, where we see, the pace of digitalization, of course, accelerated. And even in Malaysia, we've unfortunately heard stories of up to 10,000 people on average losing their jobs, month to month, and small businesses affected as well. And one of the key enablers, of course, or the key requirements for these businesses and people to stay afloat and to ensure that they continue to remain relevant and competitive is to have the right kind of skill sets. In Malaysia today, I think through surveys that have been done in the past, close to half of the SME surveyed say that they don't have the right kind of digital skill talent in their workforces to support their digitalization. At the same time, people who are in the workforce today, those who are already working, in a survey, I think that was done by Randstad a couple of years ago, close to 90% of them say that they are not confident about the level of skills that they have for the digital workplace. So, when you think about all this, of course, this is a really, really important topic to be discussing. And without having the right people in place and the right skills in place, it would be, really almost a deal breaker for us to continue to drive and grow the businesses. And so today I have, before I invite the esteemed panelists that I have today, we've got some really, really interesting and diverse panelists on the session. But before I do that, I also want to just share a little bit of what some of the initiatives we're doing at MDEC. And of course, having digitally skilled Malaysians is a really, really important part of what we do at MDEC. It's one of the 4 key pillars that we have in MDEC. And so obviously there is quite a bit of work done. Are we there yet? Not quite. We still have a long way to go. But allow me to share some of the work that has already been done. And where, this is where we're looking forward to getting more partners on board and more inputs on board to continue to drive programs that are relevant to the people and to businesses. And so at MDEC, the initiatives that we have across the organization actually span what we call the talent life cycle. And this is, where it crosses not just from the current workforce, but further upstream, the school students, the university students, and then, of course, other than those who are already working in the formal sectors, you also have the hidden or the latent talents. And this could be people in the informal sectors, think about women who work from home, retirees who may be looking at income continuity opportunities. So those are the latent talents. And across MDEC, there are various initiatives that we currently run. Yeah. So for school students at the moment, one of the big initiatives we have is working with the Ministry of Education to integrate coding and computational thinking into the national school curriculum. Over and above that, we also work with the digital creative content industry to introduce and to run various animation and game development activities as after-school programs. We've also in the past introduced areas like, cybersecurity and so on. But these are all after school, with the exception of coding and computational thinking, which has been embedded into the curriculum, and where we are working closely with the Ministry of Education to train their teachers and to support them in terms of tutorials, video tutorials that they can help run in their classrooms and so on and so forth. It's not, I wouldn't say, we still have a long ways to go, especially if you think about the fact that in a survey that was done by the Ministry of Education earlier this year, close to 40% of Malaysian students don't have devices for personalized learning. And so, of course, there are barriers, especially now during the CMCO and with the pandemic, where movements are restricted and they don't have access to computers that they would have in schools. It is an issue. However, there are various means that we are trying to overcome this. So, there are various NGOs that have come together to look at how can they help close the barrier and so on. And of course, our sister agency, MCMC, is also working hard to look at how do they help to close the access barrier. But yeah, the content is there, we need to drive it further. And so over the years, since we introduced this 3 to 4 years ago, we've got about 30% of all school children in Malaysia have already been exposed, and we hope that as the curriculum gets rolled out to all the different phases, all school children will at least get exposure to this kind of content and skills. And then with university students, the idea is to look at how do we strengthen their graduate employability. And so we have a bunch of initiatives, and the main one is the one at the top that you see here, the Premier Digital Tech Institutions Initiative, where we work with 11 universities and 5 polytechnics to bring industry inputs into these universities and to ensure that the programs that they deliver are industry relevant. To some extent, I would say, this initiative has started to bear fruit, because what we've seen is the employability rates of graduates from these universities have gone up to, on average, 95%. Yeah. So they were about 80 something, they're now at 95%. And this is only because we've gotten industry to come in and actively talk about what are the skill sets they need. And, and then we've worked with the universities to integrate this into the curricula and the pedagogy that's delivered in these universities. We have, of course, this year, we have a huge focus on the existing workforce, especially because of the pandemic and the impact on the workforce. And so various initiatives have been rolled out this year to look at how can we support the need to quickly reskill and upskill Malaysian workers so that they can continue on, either pivot to new roles or apply, get secure new jobs, whatever they need to ensure that they can continue on, with a job. And with the latent talents, we have, over the last few years, we've had initiatives like e-usahawan and e-rezeki. E-usahawan in English means e-entrepreneurs, and e-rezeki is rezeki as in like a living, how do you make a living, or e-income. And these initiatives have targeted the micro SMEs as well as retirees, who may be looking at secondary income opportunities. And so, and the first two, the e-usahawan and e-rezeki, have been fairly low entry barrier because they don't need people to have very complex technical skills, not very advanced technical skills. They just need basic awareness around how do you use social media and how do you use a computer, some level of digital savviness, and they are able to either promote their products and services online through e-usahawan, or to secure a job, on any one of the online job platforms, freelancing platforms. The Global Online Workforce is also another initiative to set up to facilitate freelance work. And here what we do is we provide training and mentoring to all those who are looking at tapping freelance work on how do you actually pitch and secure these kinds of jobs. Because of course, these kinds of jobs, they're not like the usual job application. You'd have to put up a proposal, you have to make a pitch, and depending on how attractive your pitch is, you may or may not secure the freelance job. And so this is where, and also for the global online workforce, the focus is really on higher value freelance work, such as app development, graphics design, drawing up industrial design proposals, and drafting those drawings and so on and so forth. Whereas e-usahawan and rezeki, you can get by with a basic level of digital skills. So so these are not all of these are new. We've actually been working on some of this since 2016. And over the years, we've touched more than 2 million. Of course, most of them are school children, but a fair number, of course, from universities and the workforce and latent talent. And just focusing on the workforce, because I think today's topic is, more relevant to the workforce and what's being done to support them. The government has, of course, through Penjana, when the pandemic struck, various incentives and initiatives have been announced, whether it's from HRDF or Perkeso or various other agencies. From MDEC, this is one of these initiatives that we've introduced that I'd like to share with you today about. And this is the Digital Skills Training Directory. And it's basically a guide for Malaysians who may just be starting on their digital upskilling journey. They may be wondering, what course do I take? There's so many out there. How do I choose? And so what we've tried to do is we've tried to curate it into something like a directory, which covers 5 areas: cybersecurity, animation, games, and software, and data science, those 5 areas. And we've actually curated it so that, depending on whether you're a beginner or an intermediate or an advanced, you'll be able to find what is the course that the industry experts have already reviewed and endorsed. And for unemployed Malaysians or for employers who are participating in the Penjana Hiring Incentive Scheme that's run by Perkeso, the courses will be funded by Perkeso for up to 4,000 ringgit. So these are just some of the initiatives that we have I wanted to share with you. And of course, I don't want to steal the limelight, and we have got great speakers today, and we will be discussing this topic at length over the next hour or so. And so with that, I would like to now invite the rest of the panelists to join me as we go live. Great. So we have all four of our panelists on the platform now, and so I'd like to welcome Attila, from Attila Emam from AirAsia, Dina Krishnan from DXC, Dr. Nikolai Dobberstein from Kearney, and Jeff from 42KL. Just to kick it off, would each of you mind introducing yourselves and what you do, your role? And also a little bit about what you do in relation to workforce and upskilling. Attila, why don't you go first?
You're on mute, Attila.
You're on mute. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that works. Great.
This all was working very well, obviously, in the training, in the dry run. Thanks, Sumitra, and thanks very much for having me on. Such a great honor to be with on this panel with the other esteemed panelists. So, in my role as talent learning and culture, I mean, really, it's an interesting position we're in right now. Of course, we do the navigating the business and social disruption that's affected the industry. But at the same time, we're also supporting and charting the growth path that AirAsia has gone on and has been accelerated as a result of this crisis. And I'm sure you've all read that where our ambition is to become more than just an airline and really become a travel, lifestyle, and fintech company, obviously on a digital platform, our super app. So, this really brings us to an interesting position where both upscaling and upskilling, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, in terms of attracting and retaining critical skill sets, but also importantly, mindsets for growth. And of course, with the pivot that we've done, I'm also involved in aligning our organizational culture with the new brand promise of this of the venture that we have embarked on, the journey that we've embarked on, and in particular, trying to align the employee experience to deliver that brand promise, so that the customer experience and the employee experience are aligned. So in short, that's currently the focus of where I'm going as a result of AirAsia's new direction. Thanks.
Thanks, Attila. So I'm looking forward. You touched on quite a few things, yeah? Mindsets, culture, employee experience, all that is really, really important to think about as we face this new norm, this new scenarios ahead of us, yeah? Thank you for that. Dina, you're up next.
First and foremost, thank you so much for inviting me. And I think it's one of the many events that MDEC has done. I think it's really beneficial, not only for industry players like us, but more so, I think, for people who are looking out, as in given the current calamity that we are in, right? I think this kind of forum and what shall I say, stage, it's really important. So a little bit background about myself. What I do is in DXC is that I head the HR function for for Malaysia, Indonesia, and Brunei. We span across almost 3,500 plus employees across. Now, the new norm, as we say, what we see, it's really a tough one, especially on employees as we see, and also potential employees that are going to come our way. Because the new way of working and all that, it actually brings a lot more impact on psychology itself, stress management, how things are done. So a lot of things on that pattern that we are looking at, which is very critical that we need to address. In parallel, while you have rightfully mentioned about remaining relevant at the same point of time, how do we inculcate like learning and development and stuff like that, given so we can't move about. So online learning becomes a little bit more intense, and what needs to happen. So from a DXC context, so what we are doing is we emphasize a lot on this because as a technology outfit, right, we have to constantly be relevant for the market, and given the situation we are in right now in this COVID and all that, so we innovate and re-innovate continuously. So that's from a DXC standpoint of view. Yeah, so pretty much in a nutshell, that's where we are.
Thank you, Dina. Thank you very much. Dr. Nikolai, over to you. Can you talk a little bit about what you do and your work?
Yeah, thank you, Sumitra. I'm a partner in a consulting firm, Kearney, and I have two roles there. I lead our Malaysian office and I lead our telecom and technology practice across Asia Pacific. In Malaysia since 1996, I actually was involved in helping set up the multimedia super corridor. So I've been involved in digital talent development, which of course was always a key agenda of the multimedia super corridor for a long time here. And naturally, in a consulting firm like ours, it's all about attracting, developing, retaining top talent. And over the last few years, this has become increasingly digital because we are helping companies to drive digital transformations. And so our talent as well has to be really digitally savvy and clear. So looking really forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nikolai. Jeff, over to you.
Yeah, so I'm going to just echo what my other esteemed panelists have mentioned, right? Firstly, I think kudos to MDEC, Dr. Sumi, like what you shared earlier on in terms of having a platform where everyone can have access to different types of learnings, because there's plenty of it, right? So my role here is actually pretty interesting. So as the title is FutureX talent, right? So X is that undefined, because it's very hard to actually determine what is going to be the future. But what we can do is actually to build a foundation that's actually needed for the future workforce itself. So in Sunway, as we all know, it's a huge conglomerate, with multiple different business verticals, but we also have one of the biggest education arm. So within Sunway iLabs, which is the innovation labs, what we play is that missing jigsaw piece to connect all the business verticals together with the huge education group itself. And one of the biggest project that we're currently working on together with MDEC as well is 42KL, right? So this is really a disruptive way of looking at how we can provide coding and programming education to all Malaysians for absolutely free, right? So this is something where, it's trying to bridge that digital divide, the digital literacy, the gap that we're seeing in Malaysia, and how can we close this even further together with the industry partners, right? So getting them to actually come together to work with us to understand what are some of their problem statements and understand some of their pain points and challenges so that we can address it quicker and faster. And that's what we do in 42KL.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm really, really looking forward to the launch of, not to the launch, but to the first cohort of 42KL. Yeah, really looking forward to that and to see the results. Before I continue on with the questions, I also, number one, I just wanted to encourage the viewers that we have today to type in your questions. Yeah, so we will answer them as we go, and we want to try and make this as interactive as possible. Before I share the questions that I have for you, allow me to just answer some of the questions that have come up already from my session earlier. So one question was about e-Usahawan, which is one of the initiatives I mentioned earlier. And the question is, how could e-Usahawan help rural entrepreneurs in villages which don't have internet access during this pandemic, right? And so I just wanted to share one of the initiatives we've launched under the e-Usahawan and e-commerce banner is called Perkhidmatan, well, to those of you who understand Malay, it's Perkhidmatan E-Dagang Setempat, which means one-stop e-commerce service. And it's short for PEDAS, yeah? So PEDAS, but not chili PEDAS, but PEDAS as in, it's an acronym for what I just mentioned. And we've set this up in many of the Pusat Internet desa, which are located in the same vicinity as post offices, yeah? And so the idea is the managers of these centers have already been trained on how can you actually help rural entrepreneurs to put their products online on a platform like Shopee or Lazada or whichever, and to market their products and services. So this service is already ongoing. There are more than 20 centers around the country, and we keep adding more. So this is one way in which we are supporting the micro entrepreneurs. So to go to their local post office, and by the post office, they have this e-commerce service center. Yeah. The other question. Okay, so I'll keep the other one later because I think it's more linked to the topics we wanted to discuss today. All right, so over to some of the topics we wanted to talk about. So, and this is, of course, the topic of today is digital workforce skill up to scale up. But what do you guys think? Do you do the chicken or do the egg first, right? Do you scale first and then wait for the change to happen, or do you pivot and then get everybody ready because there's a reason, there's a burning platform to get everybody ready? So maybe Dina and Attila, maybe this is something that you would have experienced, especially with the pandemic that we're facing right now. Dina, you want to take that first?
Sure. So maybe I'll go at it first, yeah, Attila. So I think at least in the domain that we are operating in DXC per se, right? I think skill up is something critical because the velocity of change in technology is almost incredible given what has happened before and what's happening now. So the change is constant and technology changes very, very quickly. And more so now to add to the complexity we have now with this pandemic, right? New norms need to be developed in the sense that how do we actually be relevant? And pivoting back to what you earlier in your opening speech, you mentioned remaining relevant, right? So technology firms such as us like DXC, and I'm sure all the other technology firms as well, for us to sustain and continue the modeling that we are doing and providing services to our client, we have to be up in our technology, okay? Now, skill up in the sense that, so when we say up in technology, we need the capability, competency, and definitely the workforce to actually ensure to execute this, what shall I say, this task, okay? Now, hence, skill up is something very, very important for us. And it's at least from a DXC context, right? Why I'm saying is that, so that keeps us relevant. And then Malaysia, at least DXC Malaysia will be seen relevant from a grand scale of the whole DXC world, right? That, you know what, DXC Malaysia has the supply, has the capability, competency to immediately engage into this kind of say task. So we have those people. And the task, and you must also understand, it cannot go on a waterfall methodology. Now, everything has to be agile, and we have fully fledged agile methodology in the sense that we have to be quick, we have to be nimble, and we have to quickly adapt and change and learn the skills that's required as and when the clients require. So that is more so from a DXC standpoint of view.
Thanks, Dina. And I guess the nature of your business is such that you have to do that, right?
Absolutely.
Because you provide that as a service. But I'm guessing it may be different for a company like AirAsia. Attila, is that the same? I mean, do you hold the same view, or has it been different for AirAsia?
As I said, we've been in a position where we've had to skill up and scale up, and maybe I should explain. You know, our culture, our company culture, our corporate culture, if you want to call it strategically, has always been to skill up. We've always been about building from within, and that's always been our dare to dream mentality. And so, of course, when we were just an airline, there was no issue of anybody who from any part of the organization who'd want to go anywhere else. So we've, of course, heard stories of baggage handlers, of cabin crew who've trained on to become pilots, and so on. And that same philosophy exists today. Now, rather than go from a cabin crew to a pilot can go on and scale up digitally, reskill digitally as well, to take opportunities as the business pivots into our lifestyle, fintech, and travel lines of business. But of course, we've had to scale up because we've in pivoting. It's an organic growth if one scales up as we try to pivot. So of course we've had to hire digital workforce to fill our needs in the area of data and software engineering and UI UX, product, cloud infrastructure. I mean, the works. But of course now, with the kind of capacity that we have, with people on furlough and so on and so forth, we're emphasizing two things: reskilling and upskilling, in the sense that we're encouraging people to upskill in order to take advantage of the kind of roles and needs of our digital side of the business, if you want to call that. But there are also, bricks and mortar type opportunities, running franchises, building our presence in across 70 cities around Southeast Asia, as was recently announced, through our teleport courier delivery business. We need people on the ground, building the business, developing the business, delivering the business. So in that sense, we're very much in an upskilling mode here, because the circumstances and our decision to pivot into those areas has brought these opportunities for us. So we're doing both, and balancing it between the needs of the business.
Thank you. Yeah. So I guess, depending on the nature of business, from what I'm hearing, you kind of have to do both concurrently. You kind of iterate as you go, right? And depending on what the business needs and the environment needs at that point of view, you need to be able to pivot quickly and to adjust quickly and to move into whatever you need to do. And on that, right? So with this work from home sort of becoming a new norm, right? And the use of things like video conferencing tools, AI, RPA, chatbots. I think even in the shared services space, yeah, Dina, you probably see a lot of that now coming into the kind of work that you do, right? Can you just share a little bit about how DXC has prepared your employees for this change? Because previously they were still doing it on site.
Yeah,
right?
you're right.
On site, as in at least in your office, but for the region. But now going forward, how have you prepared your employees for this change?
Actually, to be honest, we were not prepared. But I don't know. The irony of this was we were running through some programs, as in to see on a business continuity plan, what if something happens, right? And coincidentally, when the unfortunate COVID hit us, right? Not the entire organization, part of the organization was going into how do we manage if there was a disaster, how do we do that, right? So we were already tuned to that, but we were able to quickly understand where this is heading. And to be very honest, to date, we have only like 3 to 5%, even as much as the workforce is back in action. In DXC's world, the CEO is really very employee-centric, and safety is his paramount in the list, right? So even now, we have, with the total mass that we have, we're only 3 to 5% back in the office. The rest of the populations are literally working from home. Now, more importantly, maybe from the business that we are in, we are more dependent on technology and computers and all that, right? So we scaled up very quickly, as in how do we improve bandwidth for employees to actually perform work, because this could be deterrents, especially when you're in a home, right? We'll have the family there. I mean, given the current conditions, kids may not be able to attend school. They may be online as well. So it will eat up a lot of bandwidth. So we quickly drew a plan as in how it would not affect our services to clients as well. And in parallel, to make sure that they are also apt there. And then some of the activities we have done is like some of the office equipments or chairs and anything that they can actually, the assets can actually be brought back, and we'll deploy it in their houses and all that. That's some of the actions we've taken then. So more so, that's where we have landed. So if you were saying we were ready, no, but we were a bit lucky because we had the BCP plan in action at that point of time. But more so, working from home, it's a new dimension of how we work, all right? As much as what shall I say? Adoption is very important, because we used to gather in the office and the whole mess used to be bad. Now all of a sudden it's like at home. So we do a few of the things that we actually encourage is, number one, constant contact with employees and even from managers and their team and all that. Not only per se from a work perspective, but engagement has to be strong, right? It's the new way of doing things. So that's where we emphasize on a lot more.
So I'm getting the feel that it was fairly easy for you to, although it was not there, but it was fairly easy for you to get into that mode and to get your employees into the mode of work from home, right?
Yes, correct. I would say so, yeah. Given maybe because the dependency that ours is a technology firm, and the dependency on computers much more versus maybe my other esteemed colleagues, right? They are in different industries. The requirements could be fairly different, you see, so yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. Jeff, would you like to weigh in on that?
Yeah, so I think it's actually quite interesting in the fact that, Dina mentioned about people-centric, right? So I think that has changed tremendously. Everyone would have had a BCP plan, but it's actually executing the BCP plan, which has been the more difficult challenge here, right? So from my experience, I'm not just on a Sunway point of view, but from previously I was in the media field. I spoke to a lot of business entrepreneurs who had this same challenge where they had a plan in place, but executing that plan was really difficult, and for many different reasons, right? So you have to then look into what are the people-focused tools that you can drive in, right? So every individual has a different sort of challenge, whether it's connectivity within the home, whether it's having kids, whether it's having renovations that's currently, happening in my place and stuff. So there are many different factors that needs to be considered. But a lot of business owners during the initial stages was like thinking of it as a temporary basis. It's something that will maybe only go on for a couple of weeks, right? Initially, it was a 2 weeks MCO period. But now we've noticed that it's gone on for, more than half a year. And what's to say that in 2021, this will only prolong even further, right? So I think the critical essence is to look at some of the ways that it really can empower your staff to continue to go on and go about their day-to-day businesses before even thinking about reskilling or upskilling, right? It's just giving them the basic foundations of them being able to do what they have previously been able to do in the office itself. That, I think, most importantly, is what we have to set clearly and help many employees to go through this processes, right?
Yeah, I think that's also what Dina was saying, even basic things like the chair they use in the office, bandwidth, the basics, you got to get that right first. Dr. Nikolai, you probably would have seen a lot of your clients, having to struggle and to pivot quickly into work from home. What have you observed? How have they weathered these changes?
I would say that I think most of our clients or the companies we work with have actually adopted very quickly, faster than they would have ever expected, because earlier meetings had to be physical meetings. You had to fly around a lot because people wanted to see you in different countries, and that stopped from one day to the next. And I think I was surprised how quickly companies adopted. I think what obviously has changed is, I think, the intensity of meetings. I think it's just nonstop, I think, for all of us. And that leads probably more to a number of mental health issues. We see that both with our clients, some of the clients burn out, our consultants start burning out because it's non-stop and there's no relaxation. And I think that makes it much more difficult. So that's really made work much more efficient. It made some aspects more difficult, like mental health. And of course, I think the human contact, you struggle understanding some of the emotional aspects. No, it's super efficient. But it come back to a question, we were surprised how quickly everyone adopted.
Wonderful, thank you. And you're right, the question of culture, isn't it? How do we strike the right balance? Because when you start talking about things like emotions, work-life balance, the topic of culture becomes really, really important, right? And so when you think about this and how people adopt and adapt, I guess it's also important to think about the diverse workforce that we're seeing now, because you've got all kinds of generations in the workforce. You've got those who are the X, the Ys, the Zs, those who are tech savvy, those who are not tech savvy, various kinds, all kinds, a mixed bag of people. And how do we, in this context, how do we actually future-proof and secure all of them, to make sure that they can continue on, as we spoke about earlier, not just relevant, but high performing. Yeah, how do we do that when it's so diverse? Are there some common skill sets that we need to equip everybody with? Or do we sort of have specialized skill sets that we've got to focus and say, how do we do that? Yeah. So maybe Attila, right? Because your organization has been through tremendous change. And I know that various things you're doing to look at how do you now bring everybody along, the thousands of people that you have, onto this journey with you. Maybe you want to share a little bit about how AirAsia is doing it.
Thanks, and sorry for the loss of connection just now, just as we were talking about broadband. I think this is where the mindset and skill, the mindset complements the skill sets, and we can talk about agile teams, and we can talk about the need for design thinking and all that sexy stuff. But the mindset that's needed to do this is important, and fortunately for us, it's something that's grown and been built up over the years as a result of, as you mentioned, culture. And I'd just like to highlight three things. One is where is it driven from? Secondly, how is it driven, and what it is. Let's start with the third one. What is that mindset? And we found that regardless of whether you're a software engineer or a ground engineer today, we like to call it the digital all-star instead of the dinosaur all-star. I won't talk about what the dinosaur all-star, although I'm sure you can imagine what it is, and you've come across them already. All-stars are what we call our employee, and again, that's part of our culture, right? We call each other all-stars, and it slips off the tongue very easily. But the digital all-star is one that is collaborative. Able to co-create, which means that you also have to have an open mindset. Co-creation means that you put down your egos and you want to work on something together. There's a uniting sense, therefore. Our digital all-stars need to be keen to experiment and therefore, iterate, find out what's wrong and improve on. And that also requires some constructive disruption, right? Constructive disruptive mindset, right? So don't just say yes, but say yes and why and how we might be able to fix it. And then of course, networked. Now it's not about just working with your team. It's knowing who can provide what and in where and which kinds of project. And of course, we've seen with the with work from home and the new work arrangements, being mobile is absolutely key. So if we're not mobile, if we don't like to comment on things, and so these are, interestingly enough, these are the kind of characteristic one gets. You want to call it young people or young at heart people, commenting on Facebook, right? Being comfortable with being tagged in a picture, right? Being a little bit how Malaysians say kepochi and commenting on things and providing suggestions. I mean, it's been embodied in the social media culture, but it is part of that kind of mindset that we're talking about. So those are the whats. We found that having platforms that almost force this way of working helps. And so it's been several years now, at least 5 years, where we've adopted chat technology rather than email. and that helps a lot. Email tends to be very formal. Interestingly enough, it's like writing a letter in the old days, but email has almost taken that role. And we have our own platform here where so instant messaging is something that you do outside of work, and people would be aghast to say, oh my goodness, you want to do that in work as well. But that's the way people communicate. It's not a question of outside or inside of work. It's the way we're comfortable with communication. And unfortunately, that brings immediacy or demand for immediacy. We also have a very social media type of platform, which allows engagement, sharing of resources in an environment that we're very used to in terms of commenting with each other and keeping in touch with friends. So by having those kind of platforms that people are familiar with, it encourages that kind of mindset to take place. And of course, lastly, where does it come from? Well, in our case, we're fortunate, but it is driven very much from the top. With a leader like Tony, who likes to communicate in that way. Tony and the senior leadership who are comfortable in communicating that way. It sets the tone. So, in short, there's top down. There are the platforms that support it, and of course, there's the encouragement to do that kind of thinking, to adopt that kind of mindset that I've just described. So in short, that's how we've approached the common set of skills and mindset that everyone really ought to have.
So how do you thanks for that. So how do you address you mentioned the dinosaur all-stars?
Well, they go extinct naturally. There's no asteroid that needs to come down and no, but I mean, there's encouragement, right? It's the average age of the young force is of the young force. See, Freudian slip there, but the average age is and it's not just about the average age. I think the company also we also attract people who like that way of working, who are comfortable in that kind of approach, and that helps to rejuvenate. But it's if one doesn't want to adopt, one will never adopt unless it will affect your productivity or your way of engaging, and that comes across very quickly, right? It becomes very evident very quickly. So, but fortunately, we have more digital all-stars than dinosaur all-stars, if any.
Great, thank you, Attila. Jeff, from 42KL's point of view, what do you think? Is 42KL something which is only for the younger generation, or is it ageless, timeless? What do you say? How do we future-proof everybody?
Actually, it was interesting because when we started this journey, our target was anyone above 18, but we were looking at the 18 to 24, 25, right? Nothing more than that. But so far, we have received a number of individuals who are even in their 50s have actually sent us an email asking, can I join, right? So we have if you can take your the online aptitude test, and if you pass that and you can dedicate 28 days for the physical boot camp, then by all means, that means you have the mindset, right? As my esteemed panelists have mentioned, right? It's all about the mindset. It's not really about the age. But, if you talk about some of the do we have to innovate or change certain things in order to teach certain things, right? Actually, if you look at a lot of reports about some of the skills that are lacking in today's talent, are skills that have been around for ages now, right? These are like, the problem-solving skills, your critical thinking, creativity, people management. These are not new skills, but they seem to be further and further away from the talents that we seem to be generating, right? So there needs to be something to be addressed in the education system. Like, why are these things not being, embedded into the curriculum itself? Why are they not having, coming out of, their 5-year, 6-year educational program with all this already embedded into their, sort of their day-to-day basis, right? Because these are things that you would expect, that we would be a champion by now, right? So for us, I think it's a way of how we can look at education that has been around for a number of years now, and how the industry has moved so far forward, and that gap is so wide at the moment, right? So that's what we at 42KL and even with FutureX talent in Sunway is looking at how we can bridge this gap even closer, but focus really on the soft skills, because technical skills can be learned through many different ways. You know, you can buy a book, you can go on YouTube, you can sign up for courses, you can go onto MDEC's website, you can learn it through many different means on the technical side. But in terms of the soft skills, you know, things like your problem solving, critical thinking, I think these are the ways that we as educators need to relook and understand why is it not being addressed and how can we then embed it into a curriculum itself.
Yeah, I mean I definitely can relate to that, you know, because often we talk about the technical skills, but we don't realize that, you know, time and again, if you look at all the reports, all the studies, what employers are saying, it's not so much the technical skills that can be learned, but it's more the growth mindset, you know, and the ability to solve problems, critical thinking, to be adaptable, to wanting to know, that curiosity, that's what's missing. And somehow we have managed to downplay all of that, right? Which I think we really need to figure out, how do we bring it back again? And and I always say, education, unfortunately, is institutionalized. So it's like concrete, you know, and you have to chip away at it. So, but we really need more hands and a different way of thinking, or even, do we even need to chip it? Maybe we just need a completely different approach as to how you address it. Hopefully 42KL will be that breath of fresh air that we can bring in and say, this is how it can be done. Dr. Nikolai, you know, you must have seen a lot in your work across the region as well. How can we address this? Are there, you know, would you agree that these are the skills we need to focus on, or are there others? And how do we deal with it cross-generationally?
Yeah, no, thank you, Sumitra. And I'll build a bit what both you and Jeff just said. I think for me, this really goes back to education and future-proofing education. And I think and also linking back to your theme for this session, I think it's really the answer is that education system needs to scale up and companies need to skill up. And let me explain that a bit. I think it is unfortunate, we all know that. I think the education currently in Malaysia does not produce world-class graduates. I think not just in digital, but overall, I think, and the intrinsic talent is good. I mean, but as we also discussed, education is not developmental enough, doesn't produce aspiration-driven people with the right structured problem-solving skills. And we're seeing this in consulting, where when we hire the Malaysian talent from overseas universities, fantastic. If we hire from local university, their chance of success is 50-50. And so they'll succeed with good coaching, but not every company can provide the structured coaching which is needed. So 50% really end up in positions or situations where they're well below their performance or potential. And that's particularly worrying in the digital space. And I think and we're propelling here a continuing talent gap. We know that 25% of fresh graduates are unemployed, especially with STEM background. So that really will create a major talent gap for digital industry 4.0. It has an impact on our startup scene, which we are trying to nurture for a long time. Of course, I think this has been studied in depth. I think plans are all there, but somehow they have not been implemented on a wide scale. We heard good things, I think, from you earlier. I think from MDEC, that was good to hear what Jeff is doing at 42KL. I think some of the universities are trying. You're better off in some areas like cybersecurity, where I think also I would give you credit. MDEC did quite a lot to be a much better off in talent pool. But it needs to be tackled on a much, much broader scale, I think. And we have to have a clear focus in education, in secondary and tertiary, both in terms of focus as well as in positioning. We need to be clear what matters, be it digital, AI, industry 4.0, cybersecurity, but we also need to think about the positioning. How do you make that attractive and a career destination for some of the talent? I think I want to be a data scientist. I want to be a cloud engineer. I want to be an advanced manufacturing engineer. I want to be a cybersecurity specialist. How do we make that sexy? Because I think that's important. And I think here, in contrast maybe to some prevailing thinking, I believe it's really about education and not about upskilling. I think I've been involved also with the World Economic Forum, a lot of Industry 4.0 upskilling programs, and I do not believe that they will have near-term impact. Because if you think about digital, it's really about solving specific business pain points for a problem. So you need to have some digital skills, but more important is the business knowledge. So you need to really make sure that you equip your business talent with the digital skills and not just have a person who knows something about digital. And that's a key point. It's not just about the talent availability, but it's really making sure that you get the business talent to embrace digital. And there, of course, the good thing is that business have a natural interest to solve that. And they will do this. I think AirAsia, as a large organization, a great example. But I think that's probably not a space where the government initiative should focus on, because I think it's just ultimately wasting time and efforts, and rather focus on the education. So coming back, I think scale up education and give business to do the upskilling.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think you touched on quite a few key points, yeah? Because more and more also we're hearing about hybrid skills. And we know, even talking to the companies here, it's not just having the technical skills, but the domain knowledge as well. How do you apply it? Yeah, whether it's in a bank or whichever industry, how do you actually apply it? That's most important. And that's, I think, where the industry and the employers need to work closely with whoever it is that's doing this upskilling, whether it's the universities or other training institutions. They need to work closely. It can't be done in isolation. We have some questions here, which I'm just going to raise that's come in. Okay, so maybe this is for either Attila or Dina, I'm guessing. How do you measure the success of reskilling or upskilling training? And how do you encourage employees to adopt or adapt? Well, that's 3 questions. Okay, so I'm just going to ask the first one first. How do you measure the success of reskilling or upskilling programs? Attila and Dina. Which one of you would like to take that? You're
certainly whether the individual is taken on by the line of business. I mean, so you've got several ways of looking at this. If it is indeed the worker in the line of business that's gone to try and reskill or upskill, are they able to take it back, become more productive? That's just like any performance measurement, right? What is more interesting is on the reskilling side, in the sense of if somebody has decided to go out of their job function and take on a new set of skills, are they able to land a role in another side of the organization or another part of organization in a way that will hit the ground running? And that's one of our biggest metrics, in a sense, right? You can learn all the skills, as Nikolai had said. Do you understand the business, let alone apply the skills to a particular problem in the business? And that's more challenging. And so one of the approaches, and my colleague, in fact, Dr. Ramraj Gopal from Redbeat Academy will be speaking about this, I think, on the 27th, in another session, is that the Redbeat Academy, which we've set up, which is very much along the lines of I think what MDEC has done in other areas as well, has tried to incorporate that exposure to real work problems through the capstone project. So people will come in on the foundation course with maybe no or very little digital knowledge, specialize in one of 7 areas of the kind I mentioned: UI, UX, product, info security, and so on and so forth, but work very closely with the tech functions in Digital AirAsia Digital on real problems, right? In fact, we are probably going to be working with him. We run employee engagement surveys, and we have a ton of data that comes out from 22,000 people. The question that we want to know is, how does this relate to the kind of things that go on in the organization, like turnover and productivity and so on and so forth? So, one of the things we want to do is to work with those people who've reskilled or upskilled, and these are the kind of projects that they will work on with us. They will understand the kind of issues that we face, but then also apply their skills to those kind of problems. So giving them problems to solve rather than just skills to parade. And I think that's an important part of it. So I do fully agree with Nikolai on that part.
Thank you, Attila. Attila, by the way, could you just turn up your volume? I've gotten a feedback that bit soft on your end. Yeah.
Okay.
Dina, would you like to weigh in on that?
Sure. I think how do we measure success? Okay, so one of the programs that we have designed in the way is that we've taken a modeling kind of an exercise. Number one is that to define, say we have a global service desk or IT outsourcing work, or let it be from cybersecurity. We've actually have identified what are the key skill sets or capabilities that is required for high level of performance or high level of achievements. And we have taken data point as in where we have seen high performers and have those ratings, and what were their key credentials, or what were their, what shall I say, the characteristics of this group of people that actually made them perform every other time. Okay, so we have drawn into that program and actually defined our training based on that. And now what happened is that we have more detailed workout plan, as in like when we put people through the modules, right? This is what they need to do, rather than doing a very generic kind of a training, because that is the other thing. Now, to jive back what to the earlier topic where we are talking about education and all that. Now, where we are looking at is we are very focused in the scope of work that you're supposed to do. If I'm a doctor, I teach you what you need to be, not engineering, right? So I'd be very specific on the specific field and the work that is required. So we have a pattern and we have cataloged it in a manner that's where we put all our employees or into that module of training. Okay. Now we believe, at least there will be a biasness to this, but of course we believe the outcome is when they perform is where we have that measurement. So it's quite detailed, and actually we look at a measurement standpoint of view, this gives out the outcome that we look for. So that's how we measure actually. Sorry, am I audible?
Yeah, thank you, Dina. Yes, you were. I was just muted. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess the point that across all three of you made is the training that's given needs to be relevant to the job, needs to be relevant to whatever it is they're doing, and then to measure it against whether or not they're able to carry out the work that is needed with the training that's been given. Thank you for that. Thank you. Dr. Nikolai, maybe the next one is for you, yeah? Based on Kearney's vast knowledge and experience, where do you see Malaysia stand in Southeast Asia, in the region, as well as globally, in terms of government support towards talent initiatives?
So the short answer, intent is good, but ability to make things happen is and to really make a step change happen is much weaker. And I think, just to quote some facts, I think we run nearly every year something called the Global Service Location Index. And we run it for the last 15 years and with about 50 countries to understand where locations are in terms of the overall attractiveness as well as talent development. And Malaysia for the last 10 years has been always ranked number 3. So it looks actually good. However, if you look at drill down on the people side, the ranking has actually dropped slightly from 18 to 21, but far off from 3. At the same time, the financial attractiveness, I think, has improved. And to actually, unfortunately, extend also because the cost of talent has not gone up. Because it sounds good, but it's probably not a good outcome. And I think last year we also introduced something called digital resonance in that survey, which measures both the digital ecosystem as well as digital skills. And Malaysia ranks only at 15th, so far off from the overall position again. And I think it's of course behind Singapore, India, and China. That one can still understand overall, but it's at best similar levels to Philippines, Indonesia, and Thailand. So I think it's not, from a digital talent perspective, not very attractive. So I think this is of course disappointing, but it shows the inherent weakness which we still have. I think intentions are great. I think there are enough concepts, initiatives, plans, and the issue is well understood. It's more, can we make that happen? And come back to what I said earlier, and happen at scale. And I think that's, I think if we address that well, then we have a good chance, because the underlying talent per se is terrific.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that's where, this question has come for you is relevant. How do you think government, because, for this to happen, I think you need all the right hands on deck, right? Not everybody, but all the right hands on deck. So how do we do this better? How can we work better together to improve our ranking in talent competitiveness?
Yeah, so two suggestions, and they anchor in the fact that to be digital, you have to do digital, what we discussed earlier. And the first suggestion is, unfortunate, a realization that I don't believe we will be able to fix the education system. I think I've been around now for 24 years in Malaysia, don't believe this will be possible. But I think there's another opportunity, and I think builds a bit what we also heard from Attila from AirAsia. Because I think here, large GLCs and corporates have a role to play. And there is actually a paradox in why they should have a role to play, because they have a big surplus of people and they cannot make them redundant. And probably if you make the numbers, you talk easily 100, 150,000 access employees for the GLCs alone. And so the question is, how do we get them digitally savvy and ready? And we talked earlier, at least I don't believe classroom type training, retraining and broad upskilling will work. But what can work is driving big digital transformation programs in these organizations. So develop the digital talents through engagement, so doing digital in very specific business transformation, be it seamless customer journeys, be it core process simplification, be it operation automation, agile ways of working, whatever. I think that we all understand that. And if you succeed in that, you can really engage probably 50% of their workforces over a 3-year period. And after that, and we will have a discussion in a short while about this, at least I believe you will have a marketable and more future-ready workforce, which is employable and has a higher market value outside. Because they have engaged, they have not just classroom training, they have applied digital where it matters, and therefore can take it elsewhere. So that creates sort of a dual outcome. You drive a better, efficient, you create a more efficient organization, but you also equip the workforce, which has the desire and incentive to leave. And that's probably sort of a good way how you could easily add 100,000 digital trained people over the next 3 years in Malaysia. Now, that's of course a controversial suggestion, and I'm sure we have a discussion about it in a second. The second suggestion is less controversial. I think it follows more what we have seen in other countries. Combine education at a secondary and tertiary level with an apprenticeship model. So where you really make sure you just don't learn classroom, but it's also applied within the businesses. And so that does make sure that not just the universities teach a relevant business curriculum, but actually the talent starts working and solving digital problems in a real business environment.
Those are great ideas. In fact, I think, one of the things that the Ministry of Higher Education has done, just on that third point that you mentioned, is they've introduced this work-based learning programs. And one of it is called, it's either 2 years in 2 years in university and 2 years in industry, or 2 years in university and 1 year in industry. And, interestingly, one of the universities that we work with down in Johor, UTM, University Technology Malaysia, they have 2 years in university, 1 year in industry for their data science program. And the first cohort, they had about 80 people, 80 students. And they were all snapped up, oversubscribed, because the industry came back and said, we don't have enough. It was a data engineering program. And now they're expanding. I think they've doubled intake or something. And more, I think that's where we need to go. We need to go to work-based learning programs. And I think that's also what 42KL, if I'm not mistaken, that's one of the approaches that you take, right? So Jeb, do you want to comment on that? How do you, how 42KL is going to look at collaborating? Again, I know you also have GLCs, and Nikolai made the point about getting the GLCs on board. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about what you're doing in that space.
Yeah, but I think it's a work for both the private and the public industry to come together, right? Firstly is to identify that, we have certain challenges that we can't seem to fail with the current digital talents that are being produced. So then to sort of come closer to the educators, right? So it's finding that balance in between, right? So it's not just about education needs to step up and go all the way to meet the industry. It's also the industry needs to also come together and work with and share some of their insights, right? So what we do is we go out and we speak to our partners and understand some of their pain points and challenges and how they embed digitally savvy talents within their ecosystem to then make these individuals as mentors for the students, right? When they are provided with this learnings that are work-based projects that are real-world projects, right? So these are projects that have been embedded within their ecosystem. It's real projects that these companies are doing, but then to utilize some of the students and to give them a taste of how it actually is in the real world itself, right? So 42KL is new, but 42 itself has been around for at least 7 years now, and it has shown tremendous uptick, right? It just like the UTM example that you gave, 42 has about 10,000 students worldwide, over 29 different campuses, and all of them have 100% employability rate. Some of them, nearly 60% of them, get employed after just a year in the 42 network itself, right? Because for us, it's slightly different in the sense that our curriculum is based on the projects from the partners, right? So if the partners do not come forward and step up and share their data, their insights, their knowledge, then we can't address the gaps that they have, right? So it's working together, and I really agree with Dr. Nikolai in the sense of how it's really important for industry players to also actually come forward, because they are the ones who are actually generating the data on a day-to-day basis, but they need individuals to understand what can they do with this data. So it's a handshake thing, right? Both parties have to work together here.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Yeah, incidentally, the universities that we work with, the one I mentioned earlier, the premier digital tech universities, over the last two and a half years, they produced 30,000, close to 30,000 graduates who have a 95% employment rate. I mean, you may ask what happened to the other 5%. The other 5% is, decided not to work or decided to pursue their postgraduate. But
they probably start their own company.
Yeah, but by and large, the reason why it's 95% is because industry is, very closely tied to how the curriculum is delivered, what goes in the curriculum. They get industry to review, and then they go out and they do all these project-based, learning that they do, even through final year projects. So industries get to give projects and they work on it as part of their final year project. So, definitely it's a recipe that works, and we need to scale that to more of the universities in the country, and hopefully institutions like even Red Bean Academy and 42KL is already looking at those models. Another question that I have here is, what are the expectations of the industry, right? As far as, like maybe from Dina's point of view, what are your expectations on how various parties can come together and work together, and what is DXC doing in this space?
Okay, so I think what's the expectation is, I think there must be a, rightfully mentioned even by the panelists earlier, I think we will cross over some of the topics, right? I think there must be collaboration. It cannot be a one team effort. I think every industry, let it be from the education institution, let it be from the industry players, everyone needs to come into a common ground to say, how do we bring Malaysia? We can't look at it as in a very myopic view and say, oh, DXC. No, we have to look at countrywide and multi-facets of business. Now, how do we come together? So bucketing everyone, like now in the technology field, right? Example, if I can speak about DXC, we bring around, like what you mentioned, UTM and everyone, we have that collaboration. Actually, DXC already started that collaboration to begin with. Some of the universities that we're already working with, we start even at year 1, because some of the universities that we've asked is that, listen, you don't wait until when they're year 5, because what technology they may have learned in year 1 would have been obsolete by even maybe 6 months down the road. So let alone year 5 or year 3, whenever they complete their degree or masters, right? So we bring them together, and actually we provide a lot more where internship, or even we have our own folks sitting in the advisory to conduct sessions and all that. One of the other things that I think, just a suggestion also, Dr. Sumitra, is that you had mentioned about the freelance and all that. Just to dive into that, what crossed my mind was that we can even go adopt this. And I agree totally what Dr. Nikolai has mentioned. We can't change the option 1. Option 2 is something that we can go with. But what I'm saying is, if we can create a platform, which you already have, you mentioned e-Rezeki and whatnot, right? Now, if you can create a platform where it's on a cloud, maybe whatever, this is more from technology, but it could apply for any other industries, that if we can go back even at the higher learning school, I mean, not even at tertiary education, where during their school days, off days, we can actually put work in the cloud. Example, you have mentioned about some of the portals that we have. So we have in technology landscape, we have Qualitrix, Top Coder, or, you know, all those portals which actually allow people to go and do bidding and everything. But imagine we confine it just for Malaysian, and some of the activities, this group of people at the tertiary, not even tertiary, sorry, the higher school learning, and we can subdivide it, and the learning becomes a positive learning, and the knowledge that they build is something I would classify as skill taxonomy. The skill taxonomy will actually increase the value of that person. Now imagine when what you mentioned rightfully in UTM, right? The skills that they have learned and before joining tertiary is so much more, because what happens is from an industry, first question they ask, so what experience do you have? You know, every graduate, the question they ask, I have not even worked. How can you say what experience? I've done some intern, but this will allow them to say, I've done this project. Depends on the client. They may want to black out the client's name because of sensitivity of data, but some clients may say, no, I'm happy to share that you've done, and I even can write a recommendation. So you see the journey that has it, right? They will have all this information, and trust me, when DXC, for example, we want to hire, I'll say, come, I will definitely hire even before they graduate. So what will happen is even before in their final year, we know who are the ones and everyone that we hire. So that's the kind of collaboration that we need to actually have, which I think would bring us Malaysia, not only DXC, but the entire situation that we're in from employment perspective. I think that'll bring us to a different paradigm. I think that's my opinion.
I think that's a great idea, Dina. In fact, that's also my advice, you know, to university students who tell me they are unable to get a job. One of the suggestions I usually make to them is start off as a freelancer, because at least, even if it's not a freelancer, as a volunteer, you know, even if you don't get paid, at least it's going to get on your CV that you've done the job, and, you know, it's some form of experience, right? But, you know, I may just take you up on that offer. I think that's a really interesting idea. How do we get it like on a structured basis on the cloud, you know, down to students? So that's something we should be looking at. Okay, Jeff, over to you. So how do you see, I mean, you know, bearing whatever we've said, you know, we've talked about, how do you see, if it's even possible to see, what education of tomorrow is going to look like?
I mean, I'll be cheating if I just list down all the USPs for 42KL, because, you know, we consider ourselves as the school of the future. But I'm not going to do that. What I'll do instead is actually there's you know, education, right? And especially in the digital world, it's not just about giving a tablet or a laptop to a student and then, you know, wiping your hands clean and say that, you know, we've done edutech, right? I think it's beyond that, right? What we need to understand is it's every single aspect, whether it's the teachers themselves, right? How are they going about in learning the tools that are needed? Is the students having the access and the foundations to do this, right? What's important is, and I think this is how education in the future is going to be like, is having the ability to learn anytime, anywhere, and with anyone. And I think that is the key of how we, if we were to look into any kind of new education programs, you know, from today onwards, is to, does it fit these three areas, right? Can any individuals, no matter age, learn anytime, anywhere, and with anyone, right? It doesn't have to be with, you know, a teacher or a particular individual, right? It has to be a knowledge sharing economy, because I think here, you know, in FutureX Talent, we're trying to empower this concept of continuous learning. And just like, you know, I think Attila has mentioned, you know, earlier on, it's about digital, it's all about culture. So we have to first change the mindset of, you know, digital is all about the tech ecosystem and all about the equipments and stuff. It's actually about culture. and the knowledge sharing economy that happens within that culture is actually very important. And that, I feel, it's really what education is. And I know we're running out of time, but just very quickly, I think for a biggest takeaway is to, for anyone who's keen to sort of understand the future of education, is to go back and watch Sir Ken Robinson's TED Talk, I think in 2006, which is 14 years ago, do school skills creativity. And I feel, it's still so relevant until today, right? So I think, go and watch that video, and it really gives you an understanding of why we need to really shape the way education is, and it will then undoubtedly future-proof our digital workforce.
Thank you, Jeff. Jeff, there's a question for you here. Let me just see if I can get it right. Okay, so I guess the question is, okay, so I guess basically they're asking, how do they sign up with you? Like, they want to be part of what you're doing already and get access to all this great talent that you're churning out. They're planning to churn out.
Yeah, so I think, it comes down again, the initiative, do a Google search. If you do a Google search of 42, or if you do a Google search of how you want to learn some of the skills that you want to learn, you will be able to find it, right? So for us, it's 42kl.edu.my, you'll find all the resources there. But I actually suggest them to maybe even go on to the site that you were sharing earlier on, Dr. Sumitra, in terms of there are many different other programs and learnings, right? Even AirAsia, right? Red Academy has, their own, education platform, right? And that's the beauty of education right now. Industry players are getting involved. Google has a university. What's stopping Amazon from coming up with their own one? So, education is again, it's anytime, anywhere, and with anyone.
I completely agree with you. We really need to think about how we deliver education. And this is a question that I even posed to the local universities. Because today you can take a course from Harvard or from the best universities in the world for literally like nothing, right? I mean, yes, there may be some payment for the certificate, but it's next to nothing. And how do you compete? I mean, if you're a university here, how are you going to compete with that to make sure that programs you offer are relevant? Especially when, as Nikolai says, we see the employment rate is still an issue. They really need to figure out how they're going to disrupt themselves, right, in order to move forward. Okay, so we have a bunch of questions that have come in, and we've got like 10 minutes left, and I'd like to encourage viewers to keep sending us your questions, but I'll read some of the ones that we haven't addressed, yeah? So how do you, okay, so there's a question here, I'm not sure who would like to take it. How do you encourage employees to adopt, adapt, and how do you retain employees? Anyone like to go with that? I guess with all the changes that's happening and this tall ask of needing to reskill and upskill all the time, how do you retain employees? And then of course the good ones will be pinched by somebody else.
Maybe I'll give it a shot, Sumitra. Yeah, so I think how do we adopt and adapt, right? Of course, the new norm is something that people need to come into accepting that this is how they need to work, okay? And what's the expected and of them to perform a task or work or assignment or whatever you may call it, right? Now, more so, at the same time, organization need to understand it's a different paradigm in the sense that there is going to be a lot of anomalies when they work, because the environment, the complexity at home, a lot of things have to be of concern, right? So we also have to be reciprocal in looking at how we manage this. Now, that's one view of it. Then second part is in how we retain. Retaining is something that it's an ongoing issue for all tech firms. We will keep some, and I'm sure some will pinch. It's ongoing. All I think is that the commitment, at least from a DXC standpoint of view, is to ensure employee engagements are always at high, number one. Number two, their safety and concern, and that's demonstrated by even to date, like we don't, only 3 to 5% go back to work, and the CEO is very, very concerned that, on the safety of employees. So that resonates very well, and that feedback has been very good, especially when we did the Glean survey, and the engagement has been very strong. So I think retaining employees is something, I think communication, and also of course the more interesting part is our remuneration. That's one part which all of us will actually struggle a bit to maybe even share. But again, performance comes also with merit. Okay, that's given. Now, if we perform, I don't see why we cannot pay them anything more. You see, for sure we can, because the very basis is that we are performance driven, and there's a merit exercise, merit plan which is tied to it, right? So I think that's how we actually look at it holistically.
Can I just add to that, Sumitra?
Sure. Sure, Attila.
When we talk, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Okay. You can't see me, can you?
No, but that's fine. We can.
That's
hear
strange.
You. Yeah, now I can see you.
Okay, I think I raised a hand. That's why. So maybe that covered. You know, we think about getting people to adopt and adapt. It's almost like pulling them by their ears or their nose. I mean, we've got to think of it holistically, I think, and perhaps we want to think of three factors that will encourage this. There's got to be, first of all, facilities, right? In an organization, a learning management system is a facility for finding courses. A talent marketplace, which is something that's being talked about a lot these days. An internal talent marketplace is where search and matching can take place. So you need some kind of infrastructure. It's like a market in a sense, but you also need enablers. There's no point having these facilities if there is, internal mobility is very vague. People don't know how they may go off to train, work on other things, and so on and so forth. And then finally, there's got to be opportunities, and it could be either in the form of projects, multidisciplinary projects that really bring talent from across the organization, and again, this building from within. But increasingly, gig work, right? Internal gig work is something that we're very interested in, and gig or alt work, alternative work. It could be that you have a set of skills, you have a day job, but somebody needs help with, a particularly devilish spreadsheet, and you happen to be a bit of a spreadsheet whiz, and there's no reason why that engagement can't be formalized. Again, you need a platform to find that and match it, and an internal mobility policy, for example, to make it happen, or to at least clarify how that's going to happen. So it's these three things that come together, right? There's got to be opportunities, and we've got to create opportunities, and there are opportunities. Thinking out of the box, and if it works in the real world or the outside world, then gig should surely be able to work inside an organization as well. And there are many companies that are successfully deploying that. Facilities which enable these things facilities which are sort of infrastructures to these things happening, and then of course enablers in the form of frameworks and policies that clarify how these things will take place. So, not just necessarily pulling people to it, but really giving an encouraging ecosystem for them to operate in.
Yeah, thank you for that. So having the right structure is important, I guess, to put the infrastructure, the enablers, the opportunities. You must have a structure to do that. Thank you. So we're kind of running out of time. There are more questions here, but I'm maybe just going to ask each of you to give like your final sort of perspective, a wrap up as to what's your message? Upscale, which one and how? Maybe we start with Dr. Nikolai. Would you like to go first?
Yeah, you can imagine what I'm going to say. I think we need to get our act together on education, and you need to scale it up. Unfortunately, I'm not hopeful in the near term. So that creates challenges for us. I think it creates a big issue. So we need to find alternative avenues to develop digital talent, because I think even with all the great efforts we heard today, it's just not enough from a scale perspective. So and that is really then left to businesses, and I think business with their digital transformation play a key role in skilling up our business talent with the right and relevant digital skills. Thank you.
Thank you. Dina, how about yourself?
So I think I'll resonate back to what Dr. Nikolai has mentioned. I think I had about the same point. I think we all need to come as one in collaboration, right? Again, the quick view as in how we need to achieve this comes with collaboration of all parties, including business, including academia, and including even the students themselves. So full participation, commitment, I think that's where this can be a success. And again, going back to what I mentioned earlier, if we can MDEC play is very important, and it's been very positive, since at least from a DXC standpoint, we have benefited greatly from the programs that they've done. Now, more so if you can actually entail a little bit more on what I spoke about freelance, that makes a little bit more sense, and we can start preparing going forward, right? I think as a nation, I think this will be quite beneficial for every one of us, including the industry. Yeah.
Thanks, Dina. Attila?
As I said before, it's really providing the kind of structure that encourages people to future-proof themselves. Nobody's going to do it for them. And I think that's one of the issues as well. Educating people not so much in skills, but as we said, that mindset to improve themselves. But I think there's a lot of guidance that's needed. I mean, how many times, you know, I'm sure when I was first thinking about which courses to take in university, no idea what to do, because you had no idea about how relevant it would be in the future. I wasn't one of those people that unfortunately, you know, had their next 20 years mapped out and understood exactly what they were going to do. So I think we're left with both on the demand side, you want to have opportunities, sorry, on the supply side, you want to have opportunities, facilities, and enablers. But on the demand side, I think there's got to be some guidance as to how and what to do, and how to be deliberate about it, and how to be proactive about it, and how to take ownership. And it's all very well to say those things, but you're going to be faced with people saying, I'm not quite sure what I need to do in order to further myself and to future-proof myself. So there needs to be that counseling as well, other than the just providing pure content.
That's a really good point, especially when things are moving so fast and not everybody has equal access to all that information and trends that's happening, right? So guidance is really important. Thanks, Attila. Jeff, the education of tomorrow guy, what do you say?
I guess, you know, I'm just going to keep it short. I echo every single one of my panelists today have shared. Right? I think it's also important for the industry players to come and step forward, because it's not just the role of government agencies or the public sector, but it's also the role that each businesses have to play. You generate vast amounts of data, and so come forward. You know, people like us in 42KL are more than happy to sort of work together, and I'm sure every other sort of alternative learning is you know, happy to do this, right? Because for us, it's trying to embed new collar workers, workers who don't come from your traditional degree and masters. It's workers who are skills-based, right? So that is something the industry needs to look at themselves, and how are you adapting to this change of you know, embedding new collar workers?
Thanks, Jeff. So, you know, just I think really, really valuable inputs and insights that we talked about today. And so just to wrap up, some of the points that I captured was, yes, we know how critical education is, and that's something that we all need to be invested in. It is definitely difficult because, you know, as I said, it's structural, it's been built over generations. To chip away at it, it's going to take us a long, long time, but the future's already here. We need to act now. And so the only way to do that is to work together. And the phrase that comes to mind from all that you've said is, you know, the more you give, the more you get, right? So the more invested and involved the industry is in the education process, the more it's going to be able to get out of it, whether it's in universities or whether it's in your own employees, whichever phase of talent development you're in. And so that's why collaboration is key. We spoke about freelancing and how that can be a very strong career opportunity, not just for those who are starting out, but even internal freelancing opportunities like what Attila spoke about. And so in doing that, it's critical for us to make sure we have the right structure, you know, like Dina spoke about this as well, in about how you measure performance. And then Attila spoke about the opportunities that you provide. It's not just opportunities, but making it work, actually bringing the pieces together so that people can connect to these opportunities, right? And of course, most important in all of this is for the right mindset to be in place, and the culture to drive that mindset is just as important. So it's been a really, really interesting an insightful panel session. As always, I learn so much whenever we have different groups of people coming together. And I'm sure that we will continue to have these engagements. There are lots of questions that came through. And what I'd like to encourage the participants to do is do reach out to the panelists. You can link up with them, I'm sure, on social media or even on the Hubilo platform, and ask them directly and get their inputs directly, because I'm sure they'd be more than happy to get connected and to support and advise. So with that, thank you again to all our panelists and all our participants for actively participating in the session today. Now, I'd just like to hand it back over to the MC for the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our moderator as well as our panelists. That was indeed a very interesting and insightful panel discussion. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we will be moving forward to our next session and it will begin shortly. Click Join Session.